on various channels with Josh Dittrich of Branded Seller. So we're going to be talking about selling your own business. A lot of people choose to use brokers, but Josh has been several different routes in the business selling thing. So Josh, it's going to be great to talk this topic through. Thanks for coming on live with us today.
Thanks for having me, Michael. I'm super pumped.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that I sort of threw the live thing at you. You're like, what? This is live? So yes, it is. So this is in real time. So if you're listening live, folks, you can ask any questions or put any comments you got for Josh or indeed myself in the comments. We will see them. We probably, to be honest, won't have time to get to them because we've got quite a packed agenda of things that I want to get through with Josh today. But we will certainly circle back. If you're watching this on the replay, as many of our watchers do, then do ask questions and we'll circle back and try and answer any questions you got. So without any further ado, Josh, are you ready to plunge into recording the podcast itself?
Let's do it. First, I got to say, hey, Mom.
Hey, yeah. Hey, Josh's mum, if you're watching. Yeah. If you want to know what your son's been up to now's the time to find out what he's been doing, why he hasn't been returning your calls. Okay, here we go. Ladles and jelly spoons, boys and girls. Welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be for 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon private label and custom product sellers, a subset of the amazing FBA family of podcasts. And today we're welcoming Josh Dittrich to talk about selling your own business. Josh has just written a book called Aggregator Navigator. Really like the title. And so this is going to be quite a fun one because a lot of us we've interviewed a ton of aggregators for the podcast. We talked to a lot of brokers, but what we haven't really talked enough to is sellers or owners of businesses, I should say, who have sold their own businesses. So it's a bit of a different angle on a common topic. So Josh, first of all, warm welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, this is exciting. Happy to be here and share whatever is up in this brain that would be valuable to others that are kind of exploring the same journey.
Yeah, a lot of people are right now, and obviously set the context for us. My understanding is that the multiples for the business is either multiple of the profits or the amount of money you're going to get for the same size business has never been bigger. So paint the picture of why this stuff matters right now for Amazon business owners.
I mean, when we started a brand, long ago, we have the intention of building something we plan to sell. And so for years now, 6 years as we built the brand, we've seen multiples grow, and sometimes as low as 2 times or 24 months. Some people pay on monthly, but most of the world has gone to multiples of annual earnings. And, we're seeing high as 4, 5, or 6 cash at close, plus a considerable earnout that could put you up to the 8 or 9x range. And that's what we calculate our value to be. And most recently, our 8-figure deal in March will be nearly 8 to 9 times earnings or SDE once we hit our targets that we're projected to see. So it's pretty exciting.
Wow, that is 9 times earnings. The multiples are even higher than I've been coming across. I had from a member of the mastermind here in London who sold a couple of brands that mostly I think sold in UK only, as far as I could tell, or UK and Europe, but not even America, where the bigger money can often be. And he got a sort of over 5 times multiple for one, which I thought was very, very good. So 9 times, I mean, that's including the cash at close plus the earnout structure, which we've talked about. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Which is, thank you for the reality check on it. Yeah. There's money and then there's possible money. Okay. Right. So why should people then, obviously we've talked about a lot of these subjects. We've had multiple brokers on the show. We've had multiple aggregators, and generally what brokers say is you shouldn't go direct to an aggregator because we can help you. And the aggregators sort of just bypass the broker argument, but sort of more or less you can get it done quicker is the argument there. But obviously you're kind of in a slightly different boat. So why should we do this ourselves or consider doing it ourselves rather than using a broker?
Well, first I'll start with saying there's still opportunities where brokers make sense, right? Brokers have been around for a long time and primarily because their job is to identify a buyer, right? Well, we're living in a world now where buyers are very loud and proud of the fact that they have money, right? And so you have that one aspect, which is the buyers are now accessible via email, via LinkedIn, via web form. So never before could you find 100 buyers in your space ready to go. So that's one nuance. But I will say the other side of it is the complexity of your business, the size of your business, and businesses that are more nuanced, that are warehouse operations, multi-channel, international, and more complex. There are some cases where a broker does make a ton of sense. In my case, I've been in the space for 15 years, and we listed one business with a broker because it was a bit unique. It wasn't just an Amazon business. It was, maybe 30% on Amazon, 40% on Shopify, and whatever that delta is, 30% on B2B. And it wasn't your aggregator. That was not the buyer. So we leveraged a broker to help us find that buyer. But through that experience, I realized we were very underwhelmed with that particular broker's interest in our success. It was very, very difficult to get play-by-play as things were happening. And in fact, we just didn't really feel like a client. So in parallel, we decided to list our Amazon brand. And because I was aware of these aggregators and because I have an outreach sales background, I went to town. I reached out to over 30 of them at the time. There was probably 40 back in January of 21, earlier this year. And now obviously there's well over 100, but we reached out to 30, got 23 pretty interested in conversations, 13 expressed interest in bringing an offer, but we did ultimately have 6 offers. And many folks say, the commission you pay is far worth it considering the broker's ability to increase the value, right? Or to get multiple offers. And so my experience, we ran a process, and not only did I save 800 grand, give or take, on a broker, I increased the deal value between $2 and $3 million by running this process and allowing multiple bidders to enter the table, but also working through a negotiation process. And so my book, Aggregator Navigator, is written to give others confidence that they can run a process and can successfully sell their business, their baby, if you will.
Amazing. Yeah. So it's sort of breaking open a bit of a walled garden almost. So that it used to be that, and it's interesting, and you've got a more nuanced approach. It's not just anti-broker, which is good to know. If there's subtleties there, but on the other hand, the landscape's changed, and it's changed so fast. I mean, as you say, that the number of aggregators, we've had a lot of them on the show. Some of them didn't exist 2 years ago as a company, and they're now got several $100 million in value. I mean, it's kind of insane, which makes you think what happens in another 2 years' time, which is another conversation, which might be an interesting discussion point. But I'd love to stick with the process focus that you have. And I guess the other thing I'm getting from that shouldn't be overlooked is you've got an outreach sales background. A lot of people are very comfortable stuck behind their computer and dealing with, the public only through a computer screen, and necessarily wouldn't have your comfort with outreach sales. I mean, what do you have to say to people who feel they're in that category? Would they still be able to go through your process, or is there a nuance?
No, I think it's a fair question, but I would equate that to, if any brand has launched a number of products and built something great, that's taking relationships, right? Those relationships are supplier relationships, vendors, manufacturers. That process is similar to finding your next manufacturer for your brand, right? So whether it's Alibaba or you deploying someone in China to go find your product, like that is a process, right? And at the end of the day, if you have 2 manufacturers you like, one has better terms than the other, meaning 50% down and 50% at ship as opposed to 100% down, like you're going to pick the right manufacturer to make your product. And so I think the same can be applied. I would say, a balance between extroverted and introverted isn't really a concern, because ultimately you have to be able to communicate and be an ambassador of your brand. So there's no one better than yourself to get excited to tell someone about your brand. So here's what it looks like. Go on Google, find the aggregator you want to speak with, connect with them via the contact us form, and begin the process. Well, that doesn't take, this crazy cold calling guy. It takes that process to do it again, and then manage the workflow of those appointments that come in. And then you get your first video call, and it's two guys having a conversation, Michael. It's, hey, I have this great brand. Let me tell you about it, right? And let me tell you about the growth. Let me tell you why it's so special. And I think naturally, some of that is what's in our DNA as entrepreneurs. Like, you're proud of the baby you built. So I think that usually comes across pretty well. I think the difference is, here you go, Michael. Here's a Yellow Pages. I don't know if you have those overseas, but
we used to have. We did have, yeah. That they're pretty much dead in the water, just like in America, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but like, if you started in the insurance industry, like literally 10, 15 years ago, it's like, here's the Yellow Pages. Like, call everybody, right? And you're like, well, gosh, I really don't like that. It's not fun. I don't like that. That's not fun. But this is a lot different. Like, you're selling something, but people want to buy it, right? So now it's simply bridging the gap between why they should and how to, how to buy it and why your brand is unique and different. So I would say you're right, but generally it's much easier than it sounds if you're comparing that to an outbound sales guy.
Yeah, and you have a very good point. It's not like you're trying to. I once, this is an example of what it isn't. Talking of insurance sales, I once went years ago when I really needed the cash to or interview for an insurance job for selling life insurance, and the guy said, "Yeah, I used to go around with a carrot and a mini guillotine." He's a horrible accent as well. But I stopped when people got complaints because he used to do this presentation. He'd just say, well, you're going to die one day and you don't. And he said, you're going to tell people they're going to die and they won't like it. So that was like everything that you could imagine about a grim sales job. Yeah. And as you said, this is the absolute opposite. Aggregators are super hungry to acquire businesses and they're competing with each other. I mean, that's absolutely out there that everyone's got that vibe. So a good point. So, okay, so now we've got over a little bit of the fear around the idea of sales. It's just talking about your brand, which, as you say, you're going to naturally do. And you make a very good point there. What's the process then? So you say all process, depending which side of the pond you're on. What are the basics of your process? Can you take us through that sort of step at a time?
Yeah, I think I spelled out in my book a little bit, right? In your buyer list, you want to have the 3 C's, that they're credible, that they're capable, and they have the cash, right? So if anybody is going to sell their business, that's a mandatory requirement, right? Are they credible? Have they been around? Are they in the news? Are they building a great culture, right? And so it's pretty easy to do some spying on that. Are they capable? Have they built out a strong operations and tech stack? So a lot of times you can find aggregators that have one page. You don't know who the leadership team is. You don't know exactly how well funded they are. So those are some gaps potentially in determining whether or not you should reach out to them. And then obviously the cash, we talked about that a little bit, understanding valuations. That's a separate topic, but understanding the cash on hand or how funded a certain group might be is important. If a guy's never done a deal before and they claim they all have cash and you get to close, no one knows what that story looks like until they write it for the first time. Do you want to be that guinea pig? So for me, the 30 I identified, the process was build a list, spend time each day reaching out to them. And sometimes you wouldn't get a response back in a contact form. Sometimes they didn't have a very good form, or you might want to go into LinkedIn land and find the M&A guy, right? And you're just trying to get momentum, and momentum leads to conversation that leads to opportunities to sell. So the process I ran was outreach, follow up, provide, an MNDA. So, we built a standard non-disclosure agreement. In this case, it was a mutual one. A lot of the buyers have those already, but we provided one. I wanted to show them that we were serious. So we ran a process. Here's our MNDA. Once they sign it, we exchange financials, right? These are financials that have been prepared. We spent time on building. We've gone through and added our add backs, right? So there's a whole nother side of this around the financials I'm sure we'll talk about. But, having that understanding of what your business is doing in revenue and profit today, and making sure your add backs are ready, and really starting to talk to any questions that they have, right? And so that leads to a process that asks for an LOI at a certain date, a letter of intent, and pushing buyers to meet that deadline. And so doing that creates a sense of urgency. It allows more buyers to come to the table and really running kind of an auction, in a way to see who's got the highest bid. And it's not like, the guy that hamana, sold to this guy, whatever those guys do.
What is hamana? What is hamana?
I'm thinking if you go to an auction, right? Like literally an auction, in the city or in the farm where, a state, someone has passed away and they're selling off all their equipment, and they look at this, old school dresser here, and they would say, hey, 100, can I get $100? And okay, 125, sold to the gentleman in the hat for 125, right?
Excellent. I like this hamana business. We don't say that in Britain. It's obviously American auctions have a bit more excitement going on than we have here. So we just say things like, anyone bid me 150, 150.
Right.
At least
I'll send you a link. It's hilarious. Yeah, some of these guys, you wouldn't believe. You're like, what are you actually saying?
Excellent. Well, yes. So in other words, that's another thing it isn't. So I guess we sort of outlined the fact that it's not going to be some kind of crazy, intense auction, and it's not going to be like selling insurance or anything like that. It's a lot more, more relational based than that, as you said.
100%.
Funnily enough, two reflections that I have on it, having heard you talk about the process. I mean, first of all, for the wrong person, it sounds like I can understand why they will hire a broker, because this is clearly a lot of work and it requires a certain skill set that some people will have and maybe some don't. But also equally, I can imagine for the right person, that it's a very doable process, because it's no more complicated than trying to develop a new product. I mean, in fact, probably a lot less complex than trying to develop a new product you ship in from China.
A good point.
Dude, if you could do that, I think most things are easier than that in my experience.
That's it, man. And think about that, right? The average entrepreneur, whether it's solopreneur with one guy running a 6, 7, 8 figure business, or a guy with a team. In our case, like that's a good point. Like if you are doing all aspects of your business, well, first of all, you should be getting out of the day-to-day and thinking about how you're going to focus on the growth, right? So the day-to-day gets handled, and that's working in your business, but working on your business is, how do I create more value, right? How do I create $500 an hour value? And so with that mindset, for me, it was very simple to say, I have a team. We have a team, a warehouse, and a staff that's already doing day to day. What is the opportunity cost for me to sell my business? Well, can I really go find something that's going to make me an extra $2 or $3 million potentially, or $1 million, and save 6, 7, 800 grand on a broker fee? Meaning that's maybe an extra $2 million of net for 3 months of my time. That's a pretty good ROI, right? And so if you're not in that position, if you're doing all the inventory planning, if you have fulfillment by merchant, or you're doing multi marketplace management, and you're shipping Walmart orders, and you're doing the accounting because you don't have a bookkeeper, like, you're going to feel stressed. Absolutely. But my headspace was like, okay, that stuff is already handled. When I wake up in the morning, I'm looking to see how many new appointments requested I have, right? And I'm looking to charge the day with seeing this business to an exit. And here's the funny part. In this day and age, like, multiples are ridiculous. We weren't even planning to sell that business. We thought, let's start a process. And if the value came back exciting, then we're going to move forward with it. And sure enough, that's what happened. But, I can't say the same would have happened 2 years ago.
Yeah, very interesting. And I guess what you're saying is really simple, which is, if you're already working on your business, which is building an asset, in other words, that's a very high leveraged use of your time, high return on invested time and effort. Sure. The next highest, well, possibly even higher return on investment is saving several $100,000. That's assuming, I guess, you had a pretty hefty business, because you're looking at what, about 10% broker fee on average, maybe
5
it's 8%,
to 10 to 15, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So okay. So I guess it implies you've got a multi-million-dollar business at that point. But nevertheless, even a smaller one, and it's 2 million net for a few months of your time, I can really see why it's a skill set worth developing. And plus, if you're going to develop brands multiple times, I guess it depends again on your relationship to business, doesn't it? Is this a one-shot deal for you? Is it a small business that you're busy being the operator? Most people call themselves CEO, but they're really COO in my experience. In other words, they're operations focused. And if that's you, as you were just expressing, that, juggling Walmart, Amazon, MF in merchant fulfilled orders at this time of year when an FBA is full, FBA, dealing with customer complaints, maybe an account gets suspended. Yeah, I can see that. But what I guess you're suggesting is really almost a prelude to be able to do what you've done, which is to say, get the stuff off your plate. So is that something that do you address that in your book? That's quite a broader kind of prelude to this whole process you're talking about? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. I think the way I wrote about it is about having a serious self-reflection, right? Looking in the mirror and understanding your capacity. I'm a guy, even if I don't have capacity, I say that I do. That's just my DNA, right? So it's being honest with yourself. Like, is it going to be 8 hours to 10 hours a day? No, you decide your schedule. You decide when those calls are going to work for you. You're in control of your deal. So if you're running your job, your day-to-day 8 to 5, and by the way, I would argue you're still not a COO in that example. You might be an operations supervisor if you're running all of those things.
Very good point. Yeah. Let's be even more brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. But in my experience, like, I helped a guy in a business grow it to over 50 million. And I saw a lot of these pieces. I saw, we were on traction in EOS, and how to elevate and how to delegate and how to work on your business and not in. So when we started this business 6 years ago, it was all about how do we create more capacity to create bigger value. And so let's just say 8 to 5. Let's say you're doing $1 million a year, and you're still your everything, and you haven't outsourced anything. Well, guess what? That means from 4 to 6, maybe you're going to pick up 2 hours a day, or maybe it's at the end of your bed from 8 to 9 o'clock. You're going to explore, and you can have those phone calls, even if it's a side hustle, right? These guys are willing to do whatever it takes, which means you can get them on a call, whatever works for you. They want your business. And if they want your business, they're going to find a way to make it work, to have time to discuss the opportunity, right? So, it comes down to, is your health good? Your motivation for selling, why you want to sell, are you too sick to even have conversations, right? These are indications that maybe it's not even the right time to sell anyway. So you need to have a reality check on your capacity. And I think that can't be emphasized enough.
Yeah, it's an interesting point there. I guess that, this is a bit of a different, I want to keep exploring this because I think this might be the biggest barrier to people doing what you've done, actually. It's time and energy. It's not necessarily capability, because a lot of us have come into this space from doing completely different day jobs and, corporate work or whatever it is. And we've developed one heck of a lot of different skills in a short time because we had to. So I guess if this is another one, there's no particular intrinsic reason. For some people, it won't make sense because of their personality, but for a lot, it will. So I think the big barrier is the time and energy. So let's talk more about then, if this is something you feel you can talk to, but it sounds like from your experience, you can. It's not so much about selling your business, it's being in a position where you can run the process of selling it yourself, because it's really high leverage use of your time. So how do we go from being that person that's running everything to being the person with a team? You mentioned traction, which I know, and there's a book that comes out quite often with great praise attached amongst my Amazon sellers I know. So tell me about how you develop that process.
Well, at the end of the day, like, that process is about working on your business ultimately, but getting the team. So this is the difference, right? Solopreneur versus someone who's built a team. Traction was intended for small teams. It's the entrepreneurial operating system. So Traction is a book that talks about how to get traction, but they reference a model called EOS, the entrepreneur operating system. And that works when you have a core team in place. In fact, you couldn't be 2 employees to do it either. You need to have what you call a leadership team, and maybe even some departments. And the reason for that is because to get everyone rowing in the right direction, you need to have a common mission and a vision and a set of targets, and have the whole team aligned with where you're going. It's easy to do that in a way on your own, but at the same time, it's very difficult because you're doing 1,000 things. So I think the easiest thing to do is start with the things you're doing every day that are low value activity that are high use of your time. For example, customer service emails, right? Well, guess what? I could point you in the direction of a VA at $6 to $12 an hour in the Philippines that would gladly do that, provide extra income for them, and take that off your plate. You're going to invest a little in time in building processes, but like, these are classic things, right? Building better tools and systems, like inventory planning is a lot of people's nightmare. I built a really sick Google Doc, and literally I pull down inventory that we have in our building, sales demand that's happening on Amazon and other channels, inventory that exists at FBA, and start to thinking about, what are the lead times from the manufacturers? How much inventory do I need to have in my building? How much inventory do I need to have at Amazon? And this Google Doc, once a week, spits out all the work that we would need to do to cut a PO, to send inventory to FBA. And some people, they can't get their head around that. Like, oh gosh, I'm running low on cash. Well, that's a separate issue. But I don't know how much to order. I don't know how much to forecast, right? So finding tools, finding services, and guess what? If you can't replace, let's just say $12 an hour at 10 hours a week, $120 a week times 4. If you can't make up $500 a week or a month in value yourself, like, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur type of thing, right? So outsource the low value, high activity cost to someone else. And these are foundational things, but even if you're a solopreneur or a small team, read the book Traction and look into EOS, because it starts to get your head oriented around, what am I really building? Where do I really have the structure in place to move the needle and create value? So it's a long-winded answer to say you have to start small, but ultimately you can't move those big boulders until you get the pebbles taken care of, So
yeah, absolutely. And I like the way of putting it as well, because people talk about, was it rocks, pebbles, and sand in terms of filling your time, but actually you kind of have to start with the small fiddly stuff to make time for the big stuff, I guess is what you're saying. And my experience, 110% true. By the way, traction, I should say, is Gino Wickman, right? And EOS is Entrepreneurial Operating System. If I think I'm not an affiliate for him or anything, probably should be, but it's something that a lot of people reference with, having credited it for a lot of turnaround. By the way, your reality check is really important. If you can't replace $500 a week in value, it means your business is not not working. And a lot of people have, $1 million a year business. It's quite common that they have like a handful of percent net or STE or, net pre-tax profit, whatever it is, the number at the bottom, which means you can actually pay for more overhead. And actually $500 a week times 50, so we're looking enough money that some businesses literally could not afford that because their profit margin's so low. So I guess that's one reality check, right?
There are creative ways around that. So for example, my story, I love this story because it's very personal to me and my family, but also like it exploded our business. So I have a brother who at the time we went to the Prosper show, in Las Vegas, and he's like, I want to go check out this Amazon thing. And by the way, we get to go to Vegas, so that'll be fun. Right. And he's like, man, this is fascinating. There's 1,000 people here learning about Amazon. Like, who are these people? Right. So he's like, just blown away. He's like, tell me how to find products. Like he was really interested in that. So we left that conference with a whole bunch of ideas and criteria for him to go back and start looking for product. And I said, here you go, brother. Whatever product you find, I will pay you X dollars in commission, based on the profit that it produces. Right. And by the way, it's going to be, a little bit of a longer burn. It's going to take some time to start ranking and making money, but he's like, I'm committed. So his first 2 products, I would say, in 4 months' time would probably get us to the point of, replacing his income if he really went full time. I had this aha moment at that same conference that I needed to stop doing that because I was only launching, probably 5 to 10 products a quarter, and I'm like, I need to really double down on product development. I brought my brother on. He proved it for free. We paid him only a commission on the upside. He took a risk. He moved here, and I said, here, we're gonna double down on what's working. We know how to develop new products, and that's all he did. And we went from, maybe 50 products to over 200 products in 3 years, and that was him solely concentrated on that effort. I needed a grinder. I needed a guy who could do something better than me, right? Faster than me, more efficient than me, because I was trying to do too many things. And so, not only do I get to work with my brother, who I love, he's 7 years younger than me. We've become best buds because when you're 7 years younger, when you're kids, you don't really hang out, but it's just been amazing to see. And it was a low risk opportunity that turned into a decent risk for him to pack his bags and move here. But we aligned our vision and we killed it. And so he helped, and he participated in that exit when we sold in March. So it's pretty fun, cool story.
Wow, that is very cool. It's sort of a classic combination of family win and sort of outsourcing, or that's not the right word at all. Outsourcing, the word delegation is the right word.
Yeah.
So I guess that it's common to think of delegation means somebody in the Philippines on $4 an hour, and you've referenced right. that often is the case. And I've got somebody who'll be editing this very podcast. So hi, Vaughn, if you're listening. And those guys are worth their weight in gold in my experience. But what you're talking about is a high level delegation of a really core critical task, but you're not paying somebody up front and hoping it works. You're paying them not just on, I noticed you weren't paying on a percentage of revenue, you're paying them based on the profit it generates, which I think is a critical distinction. How did you even kind of set that system up? Because that's not an easy thing to do.
Well, I was thinking back in the old days, like you realize that this world at retail, like brick and mortar retail, was built on sales reps, right? Reps. So manufacturers have a great product, but they don't have the time and effort to invest in getting their product necessarily in Target or Walmart, right? And so these reps are paid between 3 and 5%. No base, no retainer, just you get paid when it works, right? And that wouldn't work necessarily on the revenue side because when you launch a product, you're just not profitable. I would say back then we actually could launch products profitably, but now it's so much different. And so I kind of took, the combination of this, work for free, but you have all the upside in the world to make sure we covered our expenses. And I think we came up with like 20% of the profit. We own the brand, we own the product, but we knew we were paying for advertising. We were investing in inventory. Like we needed to keep that cash in the business, but 20% of the profit, became a $1,500, $2,000 a month side hustle for him. And it was great because it was cash he never had before. And it gave him confidence that he could really take this thing to the next level. And so therefore, he came on board with an actual salary. And so that was us now being lopsided because he wasn't paying for his salary yet, but now we invested in him. So he invested in us in the beginning and we invested in him, and together we built something great.
Yeah, I
it's
like
not
it.
always that easy.
No, of course. I mean, it's your brother, so there's a certain loyalty, but there can be downsides to family business as well. I mean, I've worked with, I think 3 businesses now, or no, 4 actually in the mastermind in London. Some of them have been around for quite a while, and they have very complex family ownership structures. And especially if it's inherited from previous generations, that could actually be quite a major downside, right? You did it the other way around. In other words, your brother had to kind of prove his value to the business, but was paid, reasonably so for that. And then once he's proven his value to the business, he then got the solid salary. What strikes me with a lot of family structures that are inherited, the structure is there's a bunch of people who got 1, 2, 3, 5% of your business who add no value at all and want profits, which is like the opposite to what you want, right? That's less common, but it is not unknown out there actually. So, okay, well, this is amazing stuff. I mean, I love what you did with the relationship with your brother. Obviously, not everyone's got a brother who's kind of gets it and is hungry to do this thing. So for somebody who's, more of a solopreneur, maybe they've got a couple of people in the Philippines doing some part-time work or something. How do they sort of get themselves on track to be out of the business enough to gain those maybe 2 hours a day to become effectively their own broker and sell their own business? How do they go from that place to this place?
Yeah, I mean, I even look back in the very beginning when I helped build this business. So I would say in 2010, I left a corporate job to a small 10-person company. I was employee 10. We're doing 3 million in revenue, and at that time, we weren't on Amazon, we weren't on eBay. We were pretty much on a shopping cart, and the whole business was D2C, but also had some B2B. So I came on board to do B2B. But I'm like, guys, why aren't we doing Amazon? Why aren't we doing eBay? Why aren't we doing, Google shopping ads? Why aren't we doing comparison shopping engines, right? So I'm like adding things to my plate, but I didn't care. Guess what? When we got our first orders, 5, 10, 20 orders a day on eBay, I was manually entering those orders into the system. Like the integrations didn't even exist back then, right? So talk to me about like being there and doing that. It led to, first, I'm going to invest my time on this idea that this is going to work. When it works, I'm going to learn the process, fine tune the process, and then I'm going to build a plan to say, listen, here's the math to enter this order versus me finding the next opportunity, right? Like, why would you not invest in that customer service person now to enter that order so I can take 10 hours off my plate a week, right? And that's I've done that since I can remember. And I think that's a small, simple example where you have to make the math work. And so there's this fine line between sweat equity, putting the time in, to figuring out here's what some people try to do. I'm going to outsource everything. Like, great. But they outsource 2 tasks here and 1 task there, and there's never a scenario where you're efficient because they're doing 27 different things. So one thing has to be repeated, right? And so that's what you're looking for, is the same thing that you have to do over and over. And that's the list. Write down your day, audit your day, talk about where you spend your time. And if you can bucketize those things as operations, maybe you actually invest in a on-hand, on-staff operations person, right? Because you can quantify the amount of time and the amount of hours you're spending, right? To put that into a per hour wage that you can hire. And maybe that's it. And then you say, whatever comes in operationally as yours, but you hire the right person who says, I got it. I could figure this out, right? And it's not a perfect science, but like that's the practical approach.
I like it a lot. Yeah, and it's really, really good. So you got I can hear in your voice and the whole approach, your passion for entrepreneurship and building stuff, but also you've got the nous to step away from physically being the technician. In another classic book to reference is obviously the E-Myth Revisited, right? That's much less granular than the EOS kind of approach, but I still like it's good for mentality shifting, I think. So the technician doing stuff yourself all day, and moving into the managerial role, you do this. Okay, now boss, how do I do this? That's a good question. Now you still got annoying things to deal with. They're just different annoying in my experience. I think some people aren't willing to do that, are they? They just want to do stuff themselves and not willing to delegate. Any thoughts for people who find themselves in that position? So I know a few of those.
Yeah, no, that's hard. Like my dad, I grew up with a father. Like entrepreneurship wasn't sexy to me. In fact, I didn't even connect it. Like my dad worked for someone else till he got fired because his side hustle grew, and his side hustle was great. It became his full-time job. But guess what? To this day, it's still a full-time job. And that means he is the business. Everything that happens is him. And so that's one example. But the trade-off was he didn't make a ton of money, but he was home every single day. And that was important to him. And he loved to be hands-on. In fact, he was a technician because he worked on copy machines. So that's a real life technician example. My grandfather, on the other hand, made so much money, but he worked like a dog, right? And he's in the trucking industry and had over 100 trucks at one point. And the guy just turned 80 and he's still driving truck, right? And I'm like, I don't understand, like, how is this sexy in either scenario? And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. So going into it, I learned on accident, man. Like, you're familiar with Amway, right? Amway is a business model, multi-level marketing. The whole principle is passive income. And so I had this mindset by trying to be an Amway and failing that whatever I did, whatever I was going to be an entrepreneur in, it was going to be solving problems, but it had to create work that I didn't have to do over and over and over and over again, that there'd be systems or processes that would do that work for me, right? And so that's the mindset you have to bring yourself around is, what is the idea I'm going to go to? I'm going to be scrappy to figure it out, but there's got to be a point in time where I can hand it off. And that's super important. The very, very, very first product we launched was, I found the bottles. I bought the label. I created this label, the design. I had actually someone design it. I don't even remember. A friend of mine designed the label. I bought the labels online. I put the labels on the bottle. And then I went, I took this big gallon jug of some chemical, went to Home Depot, got a contraption to fill the bottles. And so that was my first product, 70 items. It was a coffee descaling solution. I built myself, sent them to Amazon. I sold the first 70. I'm going, I can't do that again. But I did it one more time. So the next time around, I bought 2 gallons. And then the third time we had to buy 5 gallons. I said, I need to find someone to do this, right? Because now it was going to be a job, And so I tested it. I tested it on myself. I knew the process, and then I handed it off to someone that I could trust, right? And then I could do the next thing that would create the next product or the next idea that I could go build and run with. So hopefully that's a practical.
Yeah, it is. I mean, what strikes me about you and quite a few successful entrepreneurs I know is that they are both more hands-on and more hands-off. They're not stuck in that middle ground. For example, you outsource your manufacturing to wherever, a factory down the road from you in America or all the way across the world in China. You do that, and then that's kind of where it stays. You're still handling the customer service. You're still in with all the things that go wrong and late shipments and what have you, which is really difficult and needs somebody skilled, but it's not unlearnable. I mean, it's commoditized now, right? There are millions and millions of third-party sellers. But what you did is you were very, very hands-on with the product. So you knew exactly if you do that. And I've done that with a couple of products, but very few. But when I did, you know exactly what the problems are. You know exactly where the weaknesses are. If somebody phones up to complain about the packaging, oh yeah, I spotted that thing. I know exactly what you're referring to. And therefore you can delegate it with great precision and really monitor what people are doing. But on the other hand, you stepped away by the third order. This is kind of simple stuff, but I really like it because few people do it. So I really like that. That's a nice, clean example.
But on the other side too, on the other side, I had a former CEO and it was wild. Like, there was once upon a time, like, you remember what it means to be hands-on, to be a technician, right? But to your point, some people never graduated from that. But then there's the other side of the story. There's the guy that graduated from that, and they never learned how to flex down again. So for example, hands-on entrepreneur, technician, building something, having fun, getting hands dirty, to leading a large organization. Very few people can do that. And you look at the Zuckerbergs of the world, the Bezos of the world. He was hands-on in the beginning, but continued to elevate. And that's the key, elevate. And you got to remember, being 30,000 foot, to see a vision and see the whole world at a high level, but then to be able to go down to identify the problem at a very small micro level is a very unique skill set of an entrepreneur to be able to flex. But you need to know where your sandbox is. Like, for me, that is my sandbox. I'm the guy who's never going to be only the guy that thinks pie in the sky. I'm the guy who says, here's an idea, but I have to work on it myself. And then I delegate it, right? So there's a lot of ways to win the race, but you got to figure out and dial it in where your strengths are. And that's why I get so passionate about this. Like, helping others sell their business and achieve life-changing money is a process that's much simpler if it's explained and if you have a guy in your corner. So I literally come alongside brands that want to sell. And it's like, oh yeah, this is an experience that I saw. Here's what I would do in that situation. Like, and people don't have to pay me for that because the buyer actually pays me to be their advocate, to be the seller's advocate. So I found this gap in the market. And like, that's, again, I have this vision for building out this group of helping others sell brands, but also I'm the guy having the first level of calls. I can't do that forever because eventually my time will be just calls after calls after calls. So, I'm learning right now on how to reinvent that whole new process. And it's an ongoing thing. I mean, I'm 37, I could retire, but I would be nuts. Like I tried that for a couple of months. My wife said, "You're a lost puppy. You need to be doing something."
Yeah, that's the thing. Tim Ferriss said something like in the 4-hour work week, which I know has got a bad press, but I think it had a lot of business wisdom compressed into one place, as well as a certain degree of BS, like any marketing business. He said something like, if you are capable enough of working well enough to be able to retire, you're going to be so bored if you do retire that you're going to be sticking bicycle spokes into your eyes after the first week, which is a rather more brutal image than a lost puppy, which is very just gentle and soft. But same thing, right? I mean, if somebody's capable of building a business, I don't think they should retire because they love the game. Otherwise, they're not going to be good enough to build it. And you clearly love the game. You're passionate about this. Great insights. I really like this stuff. And thank you for being willing to go down what I think is an incredibly valuable avenue, which is, actually getting yourself out of the day-to-day so you can actually implement the stuff you hear some guy on a podcast saying, rather than thinking, oh, that sounds nice. Now I need to answer my customer service emails. So that's really practical. I appreciate that a lot. So I know you've got your book, Aggregator Navigator, that's coming out. And also I know you advise people, as you say, you can be in people's corners. So how do people find out about those things if they want the book and or even to book a call to have a chat to you about how they could do this for themselves?
Yeah, super simple. 2-in-1, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. brandedseller.com/landing. You have a free chance to talk with me, 30 minutes. And here's the deal. Like, if there's a lot more to talk about, we're going to keep going. Right. And I just want to help. Number 2 is my book is free to start. I'm launching this. I'm a new author. And I'm very pumped to just be able to help people and bring the knowledge and the insight in this super simple, easy to read 65-page book. And so I'm offering that for free just because I want to be able to give back. And I have a lot of money because I actually hired a ghostwriter. You couldn't see me sitting behind a computer, like hashing over this next sentence. Like, no, I want to, as you can tell when I'm talking, like I'm just rolling with this stuff. And, I have a great, partner in this that's helping me write it. But all that to say, I'm giving it away for free. brandedseller.com/landing. And you can book a time with me and get access to the book when it comes out. I'm hoping in January.
Amazing. So that's January that we need to look out for it. And is that going to be available on Amazon as well? Or how are you going to be distributing that?
Yeah, like another problem I have, like, you go hire a publisher, let them do this. I'm like, nah, I'm gonna do it myself. I'm gonna self-publish it. I'm going to go Amazon. I'm going to do hard copy, paperback, and ebook. And I might even, I don't know if I can get over the sound of my own voice, but maybe I will do an audible audio book. We'll see.
For what it's worth, I think you have a huge amount of energy in the way you deliver it. So I definitely would go for it if you did an Audible recording. A lot of people outsource that. I think when the business books, personally, I want to hear the personality of the author. There you go. Just my personal preference. Don't take too much publishing advice from me. I'm not a multi-million best-selling author here. But anyway, so apart from my dodgy publishing advice, I think we've had a lot of really, really great advice today. From Josh Dittrich, the creator of the book Aggregator Navigator, coming out in January. brandedseller.com/landing if you want to get Josh's book. I've just literally signed up for it because I'm excited to read that now and to get talk to the man himself. Josh, any final things that I should have asked you? What question did I not ask you that I should have asked you?
I would just encourage people that it's also important to really gauge. Obviously, there's a lot of excitement around the aggregator space right now in selling. You still need to have a business that's desirable, right? And that includes being highly efficient and outsourced, automated, right? And knowing the right time to sell, knowing your motivation to sell, doing the math up front so you're not surprised, building out a plan and getting your books in order, making sure you're doing accrual accounting as opposed to cash-based accounting. Spending time with a CPA to make sure that you're not just coding sales as the deposits that Amazon sends you, as opposed to what are the sales in the payments reports minus the expenses and fees and all these things. You're doing it right. Because here's the deal. when any buyer sees some of these gaps, they're going to take advantage of it. And I don't say that as like a secret, like, I'm going to get this guy. It's your margin is my opportunity, right? And so if the margin in the business doesn't look healthy in the books, that's the value. Well, and the reality is the business might be better if you were doing accrual accounting as opposed to cash based, that there's a lot of profit there that buyer might see. So it's really important to nail that down, have a clean accounting process with your bookkeeper, get your CPA involved and spend the money. And so I think that's a classic thing to say, but at the same time, like, I can't emphasize that enough, and happy to share more if anyone wants to spend some time talking about it.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I mean, this is an absolutely common thread that nobody I've ever talked to about selling businesses and a lot or buying. And we've had a lot of interviews now with aggregators and brokers. Everyone bar none says that about the books. So I guess it must be true. So if you're listening and you haven't got the books in order yet, go and sort that out, folks, and then come back to Josh for some fine tuning, I would suggest. But we better wrap it up there. Josh, a real pleasure to talk to you. I love the energy and passion you have for this. I mean, as you say, you could retire. In fact, you tried that out for a couple of months. So clearly it's not just about paying the rent or the mortgage for you at this point. It's going to be about something bigger, which is great. So I think that's one of the greatest gifts that we can get in life, is an opportunity to do something we care about. And you're obviously a man on a mission. So it's been, I love the energy. I can feel it here. So it's been great to talk to you. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming on the 10K Collective podcast.
That was fun. I had a ton of fun, and thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Okay, folks, that's the podcast. Great stuff from you, Josh. Love it. And looking forward to reading the book, 65 pages. I think that's going to be read in one sitting by me, because I find this fascinating stuff, this space and what's happening. Even the market for the sort of secondary market that's quickly blowing up for Amazon businesses selling to other entities. Fascinating stuff. So if you're listening live or you're watching the replay, don't forget that you can ask some comments, because social media is good for that and podcasts are terrible for that. I love podcasts, but my goodness, they're terrible for interaction. So if you got any questions for Josh, if I were you, I'd be peppering the guy with questions. Just pop them in whichever social channel we're on, and I'll either feed them back to you, Josh, or we'll make sure you're in the Facebook group as a member. But just remains for me to say two things. Thank you so much for watching, if you're watching live or on the replay. And Josh, thanks again for coming on live with us. It's been fantastic stuff.
Absolutely.